On the cold morning of October 22, 2017, in a quiet industrial corner of Oregon, an ordinary workday for a sanitation worker was about to take a horrifying turn. The man was clearing debris at a half-finished construction site, the kind of place where the clang of metal and the rumble of machinery drown out every thought. He hauled discarded boards and twisted pipes into the dumpster, working through the familiar rhythm of his shift, until his eyes fell upon two massive construction waste bags shoved against a concrete wall. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but as he tried to move one, he felt a strange, heavy resistance. The shape inside did not shift like wood or rubble. It felt wrong. Curiosity mixed with a creeping sense of dread. He slit open the thick plastic. What he saw made him stagger backward, his breath caught in his throat. Inside was something no one should ever find during a morning shift: human remains. Who were they, and how had they ended up here, hidden among debris far from any home? And, perhaps the more chilling question, what dark path had led them to this grim resting place? If you want to uncover the truth behind these haunting questions, then like this video and subscribe to my channel, Unscripted Tales, and let us aim for 5,000 likes on this story, so we can bring you more such real events that shake the soul. The scene quickly transformed from a worksite to a crime scene. Police arrived within minutes, their vehicles blocking off the dusty road leading to the half-built structure. Forensic teams moved in, their gloves snapping, eyes fixed on the evidence before them. The contents of the second bag confirmed the horror: another set of remains. Within hours, investigators realized the grim find was no random tragedy. This was the conclusion to a desperate 5-day search for a missing couple, whose disappearance had gripped the local community. But now, their fate was sealed, and the hunt for whoever was behind their deaths had only just begun. 5 days before that grim discovery, on October 17, 2017, a young couple set out for what was meant to be a peaceful escape from their busy city lives. Their names were Emily Carter, 28, and her husband, Daniel Carter, 32. They shared a love for the outdoors, for quiet places where the sound of the wind in the trees drowned out the noise of everyday life. That week, they chose a remote spot near the crystal waters of Lake Clearwater, a place surrounded by dense Oregon forest and known for its secluded beauty. They packed their tent, sleeping bags, and just enough food to last a few days. Their plan was simple: hiking along the winding trails, camping under the stars, and soaking in the kind of silence only nature could give. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the lake in shades of gold and orange, Emily sent her sister a photograph. In it, she and Daniel stood smiling with the sunset behind them, the water calm and endless. The short message with it was full of warmth, a quiet joy in being exactly where they wanted to be. It was the last anyone would hear from them. When Sunday came and went with no sign of the couple, their family began to worry. Calls to their phones went unanswered. By Monday morning, their devices were switched off entirely. This was not like them. Emily and Daniel were always in touch, even when they were out in the wilderness. Concern turned to fear, and Emily's sister called the local police to report them missing. At first, authorities were calm. Tourists often lost track of time or wandered into areas with no phone reception. But as hours passed without a single sign, the mood changed. Officers began to see that something was wrong. The last known signal from their phones placed them near Lake Clearwater, after which both went dark. What no one knew then was that the couple's quiet retreat into nature was about to turn into a desperate search across a wilderness that kept its secrets well hidden. Somewhere in those trees, something had gone terribly wrong. What the searchers found first was not the couple, but something else that made the mystery even deeper. By the time the report of Emily and Daniel's disappearance reached the county sheriff, the entire community was already on edge. Search teams were quickly assembled, made up of police officers, deputies, and dozens of local volunteers who refused to sit at home, knowing two people were missing in their woods. The forest around Lake Clearwater was beautiful, but it was also thick, wild, and unforgiving. Tall evergreens loomed overhead, their dense canopies allowing only slivers of light to reach the forest floor. And the sound of boots crunching through fallen leaves was swallowed by the endless hush of the wilderness. The first breakthrough came when searchers found the couple's car parked neatly at a small trailhead lot. The doors were locked, and inside were some personal belongings, a map, a few snacks, and a guidebook about local hiking trails. It was clear Emily and Daniel had made it to the lake and set out on their hike as planned. But from there, the trail went cold. As days passed, the search grew more desperate. Volunteers combed through miles of narrow trails and dense undergrowth, calling out the couple's names until their voices went hoarse. They expected to find at least some trace, a dropped backpack, the remains of a campfire, the bright fabric of a tent among the trees, but there was nothing. It was as if the couple had walked into the forest and simply vanished. Theories began to swirl. The first seemed the most obvious for such remote terrain, perhaps a wild animal attack. But experts who examined the area found no blood, no torn clothing, no signs of a struggle. And even if a predator had attacked, it would not have taken the tent and all their belongings. That idea was set aside. The next possibility was that they had gotten lost. But Daniel was an experienced hiker and had maps and a compass with him. Losing their way so completely seemed unlikely, and there was no evidence of them trying to signal for help. Some quietly wondered if they had chosen to disappear on purpose, to start a new life somewhere else. But friends and family were adamant that they had no reason to run away. They had stable jobs, no debts, and a happy relationship. That left the most unsettling possibility. Someone might have hurt them. But if it was foul play, who would target them in such an isolated place? And why? The forest seemed to hold the answers, but it was keeping them buried. And soon, an event far away from the lake would shift the entire investigation onto a darker path. The search teams were still combing the endless forest trails when a call came in that would change everything. It did not come from the lake or the woods, but from an industrial construction site miles away, on the outskirts of a neighboring town. A worker there had stumbled across something strange, 2 massive construction waste bags shoved to the side of a debris pile. The moment he opened one, he knew it was something far worse than discarded materials. When the police arrived, the area was immediately sealed off. The contents of the bags revealed the truth that everyone had feared but hoped was not real. Inside were the bodies of Emily and Daniel Carter. Both showed clear signs of a violent death. Their discovery here, so far from the lake, was as shocking as it was baffling. A few feet away from the bags, investigators found another clue, a neatly rolled up tent. It matched the one Emily and Daniel had taken on their trip. This was no random killing. Whoever had done this had gone to great lengths to remove their entire campsite from the forest, as if trying to erase any sign that they had ever been there at all. The medical examiner later confirmed the cause of death. Both had been shot, the wounds suggesting a swift and brutal attack. The estimated time of death was either the evening of October 17th or the morning of October 18th, which matched exactly with when they had gone missing. The realization hit hard. This was not an accident, not a case of lost hikers succumbing to the elements. This was murder. And now the police knew they were looking for someone armed, dangerous, and calculating. The investigation shifted immediately. It would be split into 2 main efforts, one team focusing on the construction site and how the bodies got there, and another returning to the forest to search for any trace of the crime scene. What no one knew yet was that the killer had been careful, very careful, and his method of covering his tracks had left investigators with almost nothing to go on. But sometimes, the smallest detail can open the door to the truth. With the grim discovery at the construction site confirming the worst, the investigation split into 2 relentless pursuits. One group of detectives turned their attention entirely to the site where Emily and Daniel's bodies had been found. They worked through long lists of workers, truck drivers, and security personnel, questioning each one about anything unusual they might have seen. Day after day, they combed through details, hoping for a slip in memory or a clue overlooked. CCTV footage from the area became another massive undertaking. Hours upon hours of grainy recordings showed a constant stream of trucks, cars, and heavy equipment moving in and out of the site. Every frame was studied, but in the chaos of a busy construction zone, any person quietly slipping in during the night with 2 heavy bags could vanish into the blur of movement. No one recalled anything that could point to the killer. Meanwhile, the second team returned to the thick forest around Lake Clearwater. This time, they were not searching for missing hikers, but for the exact spot where the murder had taken place. Knowing that both victims had been shot, they hoped to find shell casings, traces of blood, or any sign of where their tent had once stood, but the forest gave nothing away. The ground was blanketed with fallen leaves, the undergrowth was dense, and any small trace could be buried or washed away in a matter of days. The lack of evidence told investigators something chilling. Whoever had committed the murders had known exactly what they were doing. They had removed the bodies, the tent, and every last piece of the couple's belongings from the scene. It was a methodical erasure, as if the crime itself had been plucked out of the forest and scattered somewhere far from where it happened. The case was beginning to stall. Weeks of work had brought no suspect, no clear lead, but then, a single witness came forward with a memory that would shift the focus of the entire investigation. Just when it seemed the investigation was drowning in dead ends, a quiet tip changed the entire direction of the case. An elderly man who often visited the trails near Lake Clearwater to watch birds came forward. He told police that on October 17th, the day Emily and Daniel disappeared, he had seen a Forest Service van parked close to the same lot where the couple's car was later found. It was not unusual for rangers to patrol there, but what caught his attention was the driver. He remembered seeing the man in uniform speaking with a couple who looked very much like Emily and Daniel. At the time, it seemed harmless, but with news of their deaths, the memory had begun to gnaw at him. Investigators acted quickly. They requested the patrol records for that day from the forestry department, narrowing their focus to those assigned to that sector. One name stood out, a ranger named Brian Hale. He was 42 years old, had been working for the department for over 15 years, and was known as a man who kept to himself but was considered dependable. He lived alone in a small house at the edge of the national park, a short drive from the lake. On paper, he was the last person anyone would suspect. Detectives visited his home to speak with him directly. Brian opened the door calmly and confirmed that he had indeed been patrolling near the lake that day. When shown photographs of Emily and Daniel, he paused for a moment before saying that, yes, he remembered them. According to his account, they were about to head down one of the trails, and he had warned them that part of the route ahead was closed for maintenance. He said they thanked him, and he drove off. The story sounded reasonable, but the detectives noticed something they could not ignore. His hands trembled slightly, and he avoided meeting their eyes. It could have been nerves from being questioned, but it also could have been something more. They did not confront him directly. Instead, they thanked him for his time and left, but the decision had already been made. Brian Hale would be watched closely, and a search warrant for his home and work vehicle would be prepared. What the police would soon uncover in his van would turn suspicion into certainty. 2 days after speaking with Brian Hale, detectives arrived at his home in the early morning with a signed search warrant in hand. The quiet street was still wrapped in dawn light as officers moved in. Brian watched from his kitchen table while investigators began their work, his expression calm but unreadable. The search of the house was methodical. Every drawer was opened, every cabinet checked, but nothing stood out. There were no weapons, no blood-stained clothing, no sign of anything that could connect him to Emily and Daniel's murder. For a brief moment, it seemed like the entire lead might dissolve into nothing. But then, attention shifted to his Forest Service pickup parked in the yard. The back of the vehicle was cluttered with tools, ropes, and containers, nothing out of place for a ranger. One detective's eyes fell on a large tarp crumpled in the corner of the truck bed. When it was pulled back, several heavy bags of animal feed were revealed, but beneath them was something entirely different. There, dusty and stained from the outdoors, were 2 hiking backpacks, 2 sleeping bags, a small cooking pot, and a gas burner. The items were instantly recognizable. They belonged to Emily and Daniel Carter. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the scratch of a pen as evidence tags were written. Brian's shoulders seemed to sink as the reality of the discovery settled over him. The officers did not need to say much. The gear was enough to justify immediate arrest. He was handcuffed beside the truck he had driven for years. The same truck that now held the truth he could no longer hide. The question that now pressed on everyone's mind was why? Why would a trusted ranger take the lives of 2 people he had never met before that day? At the station, Brian Hale sat in a small, dimly lit room, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. The evidence was already stacked against him. The camping gear, the witness account, the timeline, but the detectives were patient. They placed photographs of Emily and Daniel's belongings on the table and spoke in calm, steady voices, asking the same questions over and over. Where did you get these? What happened at the lake? Where is the weapon? Hours passed in silence until the weight of it seemed to press the air from the room. Brian's shoulders slumped, and his voice finally broke the stillness. His story was not one of a calculated serial killer, but of a man whose fear spiraled into something irreversible. He admitted that for months, he had been cutting down valuable trees in a restricted area of the forest and selling the timber to a small, private mill. It was easy money, and with his knowledge of the land, he believed no one would ever catch him. But on October 17th, while checking on one of his hidden logging spots, he came across a tent. Emily and Daniel had unknowingly set up camp in the closed-off area, far from the main trail. He claimed his first instinct was to get them out of there quickly. He approached them in uniform, told them the area was off-limits, and they began packing their things without argument. But then he saw Emily holding her phone, its camera pointed toward the trees. In his panicked mind, he imagined she was gathering proof of his illegal work. He pictured them going to the authorities, his job lost, his reputation destroyed, and himself facing prison. He demanded to see the phone. Daniel stepped in to protect his wife, telling Brian they were leaving and had no reason to cause trouble, but Brian convinced himself they were lying, trying to appear calm until they could leave with evidence. That was when the fear took control. He pulled his service pistol. 2 quick shots ended the couple's lives before either could react. The forest fell silent, and in that quiet, the reality of what he had done sank in. But instead of calling for help, he focused on erasing every trace. He rolled up their tent, gathered every belonging, and placed the bodies into heavy garbage bags he carried in his truck. Under the cover of night, he drove to the construction site, choosing it because of the constant noise and movement that would hide his actions. He dumped the bags with the bodies and tent into a large container, intending to dispose of the camping gear later. That gear, left hidden in his truck, became the final thread that unraveled everything. When asked about the weapon, he admitted to throwing it into a nearby stream. Police later recovered the pistol, and ballistics confirmed it was the one used. In the murders, the final piece of the puzzle was now in place, but the court would still have to decide the cost of his actions. The trial of Brian Hale drew heavy attention across the state. People could not comprehend how a man whose job was to protect the forest could be responsible for such a violent and senseless crime. The evidence was overwhelming. The witness account, the recovered camping gear, the ballistics test matching the pistol, and his own confession, in court. The families of Emily and Daniel listened in silence as the details of their final moments were described. Every word was another reminder of how quickly their lives had been stolen. The prosecution laid out the case with precision, showing how one man's fear of losing his job and facing minor charges for illegal logging had spiraled into a brutal double murder. Brian Hale was found guilty on all charges. Taking into account the confession, but also the severity of the crime, the judge sentenced him to 45 years in prison. There was no celebration in the courtroom, only a heavy stillness. Justice had been served, but nothing could bring Emily and Daniel back. For the families, the verdict closed the legal chapter, but left an emptiness that could not be filled. A peaceful trip into nature had ended in a way no one could have imagined. The quiet shores of Lake Clearwater still hold their memory, a reminder of how fragile life can be when fear takes control. If you are still watching this story, it means this story deserves your like and subscribe, and please help me complete 5,000 likes, because this is a challenge from my mother, so help me guys, it is totally free. Also, tell me in the comments from which city you are watching this story.